stand ready to answer your questions.
Representative, maybe this is even better for Ken, since you talked about stand your ground and how this is not what other states have done in terms of stand your ground. How is what Ohio is proposing to do substantively different from what Florida has and what we generally think of as a stand your ground?
Well, for instance, in Florida, self-defense isn't proven by the defendant. They treat it as a reasonable doubt approach. In Ohio, in order to act in self-defense, the defendant has the burden to prove they were acting in self-defense. So that's a substantial difference right there. Second, Florida's law, if you read the jury instructions in the case, which shall not be named, the stand your ground, the word stand your ground appear once out of like 45 pages. And it talks about you may stand your ground, you may meet force with force. Ohio's not doing that. All they're doing is removing one of the 3 steps, and the defendant would still have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that they met the first 2 steps. And actually, I mean, just as a general matter, Ohio is a small minority of the states that treat self-defense as an affirmative defense versus as creating reasonable doubt or negating the mental intent of the underlying offense.
Proponents of the bill have made the case that Ohio has strong enough laws already that the duty to retreat doesn't need to be removed, but it's not being a law that's abused right now. I mean, can you speak to that? Why Ohio must take this step?
The duty to retreat predates firearms. It comes from the 1300s and 1400s in England. And most of the United States soundly rejected it for over 100 years. And Ohio's Supreme Court was among the leaders in that. It is a relatively recent addition to our law when you look at the historical concept of, if duty to retreat arises in the 1300s or so before there's even firearms. We're using a medieval concept for modern self-defense. And no one believes you can outrun a gun. No one believes you can outrun a trigger pull. And the thing to keep in mind, self-defense is a federal constitutional right and a state constitutional right. So we do not start from the position where we have to show that the government doesn't have a need. The government has to start from the position that they do have a need. And I have not seen that case made.
Can you explain, I'm just trying to fathom the situation where was described earlier, where a woman has a gun to her head in a parking lot and decides to take action and pulls out her own gun and shoots the guy, and is somehow going to be in trouble for doing so.
I don't know whether she'll be in trouble or not, but she has the duty to prove she couldn't retreat. Which, you think, well, of course, in that case, she couldn't retreat. She still has the burden to prove she couldn't. And let me point out to you, in a real case here in Ohio, the judge instructed the jury that a prisoner had a duty to retreat from a locked jail cell. It was a killing between 2 roommates in a jail cell, and the judge still instructed that jury that the defendant had to prove he couldn't retreat from a locked jail cell. Now, would they be in trouble? That's a separate issue. You have a lot of human beings involved in the process that can take a look at it and make a decision that, okay, in that case, they could retreat. What I'm pointing out is the case where you can safely retreat is the very rare exception, and the cases where you can't retreat are the overwhelming norm. So the burden should be on the state to prove why this duty to retreat should continue.
I'd like to add something to that, if I might. I'm a lay person. I'm a doctor. I'm not a lawyer, so I really do need my experts to help me out with this. I had no idea about the medieval stuff or the common law, whatever there was. And that's why we need experts to speak to this beyond the hyperbole that we really have in the national media. What a person really has the duty to do is defend him or herself. You have a natural right to life. So the duty is that. And by no means would this law make it so that you could not retreat. In a reasonable person, if there is that mechanism, you're looking at a situation, and all situations are different, and you wanted to retreat, you still could. This law would not stop that. But, on the other hand, if you were in the circumstances that Ken Hanson described, in a legitimate self-defense situation, legitimately fearing for your life in a situation that you did not cause, did not prolong, that you did not exacerbate, and where you're allowed to be carrying a firearm, I want that person to defend him or herself. I want that ambiguity removed. And for me, that's putting us closer to the intent of the Second Amendment, a constitutional right that we all have as Americans to defend ourselves, to the right to bear arms.